Hello everyone, it's 7 o'clock. Jeremy Hunt has defended his budget as a plan for growth to get people back to work as he faced accusations of handing some of the country's wealthiest people a £1 billion tax giveaway. I'll press the Chancellor on plans point by point and he joins me in a few minutes' time. Labour have called on the government to think again, saying that they'll reverse the pensions tax break if they gain power at the next election. The Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, joins me later in the programme. It's Thursday, the 16th of March. The wrong priority for the wrong people. Labour says it will reverse Jeremy Hunt's pension reforms as the Chancellor defends his budget as a plan for growth. The banking giant Credit Suisse is to borrow £45 billion from the Swiss Central Bank after its shares plunged yesterday.
Passengers face disruption again on the railways as a fresh wave of walkouts by the RMT bring many services to a standstill.
The Foreign Secretary heads to Moldova, promising more UK support for the country against Russia's influence. Potential buyers queue up for a look around Manchester United with a visit expected today from Qatar's Sheikh Jassim.
I came back to let you know, got a thing for you, and I can't let go.
And the R&B singer Bobby Caldwell, best known for this 1978 hit What You Won't Do for Love, has died at the age of 71. Hello, good morning. Labour says it will reverse Jeremy Hunt's plans to scrap the lifetime allowance for pensions if it comes to power at the next election. The new rules will allow high earners to save more money into their pensions tax-free. Labour says the plan will help the wealthy few. But the Chancellor has defended his budget, which he says will have a transformational effect on the economy. Here's a reminder of some of the key announcements. Well, the UK is expected to avoid recession this year, with forecasts that inflation will fall to 2.9% by the end of 2023. For households, the energy price guarantee will continue until June, with energy bills remaining at £2,500 cap. Fuel duty, including the 5 pence a litre cut, will be extended, and beer duty has also been frozen. 30 hours of free childcare a week will be available to working parents in England for children aged between 9 months and 5 years. The lifetime allowance, the total amount that people can save into their pension pot before paying extra cash, has been scrapped, and the pension's annual tax-free allowance will rise by 50%. For business, a £9 billion full expensing scheme will let firms who invest in IT, plant or machinery deduct the cost in full from their taxable profits. Well, let's continue with the budget. Talk to the man who delivered it. I'm joined now by the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt. Good to talk to you this morning, Mr Hunt. If you don't have a child on the way or a pension pot over £1 million, what's in this budget for you?
Well, good morning, Jane. A great deal, because we introduced help for people struggling with cost of living pressures that amount to £3,300 for the typical household over this year and last year. We've extended the energy price guarantee at £2,500 for another 3 months. We've frozen fuel duty, which will keep the cost of petrol down. And what we are doing is we're helping people through a very, very difficult period. But we're also tackling, as you mentioned just then, the long-term issues facing the economy, which is that we have 1 million vacancies up and down the country, and we want to remove the barriers that stop people from working. And the biggest area of concern for us is the NHS, where doctors have been retiring early. That's meaning that we have these long waiting lists, 7 million people on the waiting list. And so we've announced measures that will tackle those head on.
But is persuading consultants who are on over £100,000 really the problem? Isn't it fundamentally the problem that we need more nurses?
Well, we need more nurses, and we are recruiting many more nurses into the NHS. But yes, I think if you can talk to anyone in the NHS, they will say doctors leaving the workforce because of pension rules is a big problem. It's something, incidentally, that Labour advocated last September. Wes Streeting said that we should get rid of the cap on pensions, the lifetime allowance. He seems to have changed his mind overnight on that one. He said it was crazy and it would save lives to get rid of that cap. Well, he was right in September when he said that. The British Medical Association,
we're talking to Labour a little later in the programme, so we'll put those points to them. But you say you really are helping people. But after 13 years of a Conservative government, we've got teachers, doctors, transport workers all out on strike. Even your own civil servants are on strike. Analysts have said that by freezing income tax in the budget yesterday, you're effectively adding 4p to income tax for around 6 million people. That's from the OBR. People are losing money, and the OBR says it's going to get worse before it gets better. This isn't a budget for the people.
Well, we had to help people in the pandemic. We spent £400 billion helping businesses and families. We're spending nearly £100 billion helping families with cost of living pressures because of the energy crisis. We have to be honest with people. That has an impact on our accounts. We'll always be responsible with people's money. And we want to help people through a difficult period. But we want to go on the path to lower taxes as Conservatives. One of the things that's happened in the last year, for the first time ever in this country, you can earn £1,000 a month without paying a penny of tax or national insurance. So Conservatives will always bring taxes down when we can. But when people are going through difficult periods, as they are now with these huge increases in energy bills, of course we want to help people.
But you've only got 18 months to bring in these tax cuts, of which we've not seen any in this budget. I mean, is it enough to catch up Labour before the next election? They're some 20 points ahead. Are you not concerned that in 18 months' time, the narratives of the Conservatives crashing the economy is still going to be at the front of everyone's mind? This isn't bold enough.
Well, I think if you look at the measures I announced yesterday, which are removing the barriers for thousands, hundreds of thousands of parents who are struggling to get back to work because of childcare. They will cut in childcare costs. That's nearly 60%. I think the one thing people wouldn't say, Jane, is that it's not bold in terms of its ambition. We want to remove the barriers that stop people who want to from working. By the way, there's a huge package in there for long-term sick and disabled, because we think with the potential of working from home, Zoom, Teams, the idea that because you have a disability means you shouldn't be able to work or you can't work, we think that's very outdated, and we're going to get rid of the work capability assessment and give people support to help them get back into work. So this is, I think, a budget that helps businesses fill their vacancies. Sorry, carry on.
It's just about the speed. It's just not fast enough, is it? I mean, the childcare plans, if you've got a 9-month-old baby, you're not going to benefit from these because your baby will be 3 or 4 by the time it kicks in. Or if you have a 3-year-old baby, it'll be 5 by the time it kicks in. In fact, it's only people who are thinking about getting pregnant now who are going to benefit from this. It's not going to have kicked in by the next election. And it's going to take 3 years to organise wraparound childcare for schools. Why on earth does it take so long to sort out kids' clubs?
Well, this is the biggest transformation in childcare in my lifetime, Jane. It's a huge change, and we're going to need thousands more nurseries, thousands more schools offering provision they don't currently offer, thousands more childminders. We are going as fast as we can get the supply in the market to expand. But it's the right thing to do because we have one of the most expensive childcare systems in the world. And we know that it's something that's a huge worry for women in particular, that they have this cliff edge when maternity leave ends after 9 months, no help until the child turns 3, and that can often be career ending. So I think it's the right thing to do for many, many women to introduce these reforms, and we are introducing them as quickly as we can because we want to remove those barriers to work. By the way, that's also very good for business, which is why yesterday's measures were welcomed by the main business organisations like the CBI. They've been saying for some time now that childcare is causing a big problem for businesses who are losing staff when they really need them the most.
But analysts have also said, yes, it's great that business is having investment, but one thing that you didn't mention yesterday was public sector pay. And you need to invest in business, but you also need to invest in the public sector. Why do you not think these two things run side by side?
Well, they do. And that's why in the autumn statement we announced an £8 billion package for the NHS and social care system, a £3 billion package for our schools. Those pay negotiations are happening now. I think they seem to be making encouraging progress. We'll wait for news, but we want to solve them as quickly as we can, and that's why we're having those discussions.
You made it really clear that yesterday's budget was all about getting people back to work. Why do you think fewer people came back to work in the UK after COVID than they did in Europe and the rest of the world? And we have so many people on long-term sick. Why do you think this is? Has the UK got a particular problem with laziness?
I don't think that at all. I think people in this country work extremely hard. But and if you look at what's happened over the last 13 years since we've been in power, unemployment has halved. We have 2 million more disabled people in work. We have an employment level at 76% that's fairly normal for advanced economies. But if we had the employment levels they have in Holland, for example, we would have 2.7 million more people in work. So we could fill every vacancy nearly 3 times over. And that's why we recognise when we want to boost growth, to generate more tax revenues for our NHS and our schools, that we need to remove the barriers that stop, for example, young parents from going back to work when they have children.
Do we need more immigration? The OBR has pointed out that 250,000 people are expected to come to the UK this year. Do you think that fundamentally is something we need to be focusing on?
Well, I think the decision of the British people in the Brexit referendum was that we want an economic model that does not depend on unlimited low-skilled migration. And
do you think
that's why yesterday I set about... Well, that's why I want to change that. And that's why yesterday I set about systematically removing the barriers, not just young parents worried about childcare costs, but job seekers, older people, long-term sick and disabled, those 4 groups of people where there are lots of people who face barriers to work, and we want to take away those barriers so that we don't have an economy that is dependent on unlimited migration.
OK, one final question before I let you go, because I know you've got lots of other interviews to do. Credit Suisse, how concerned should we be about what is happening there? Are you worried about contagion in British banks?
Well, as you know, Jane, chancellors never comment on what's happening in the markets. Obviously, I'm following the situation. The Governor of the Bank of England is following it very closely. I think the news we've heard from the Swiss authorities this morning is encouraging, but I won't say any more than that.
Jeremy Hunt, very good of you to talk to us. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, I'm joined now by our business correspondent, Gurpreet Narwan. Gurpreet, we've now had a little bit of time to digest what happened in the budget yesterday. For example, what are the OBR saying?
Yeah, it was a bigger budget than I think many people were expecting. And the OBR's assessment of the economy was a little bit brighter than its last forecast. But I'm afraid that much of the good news ends there, because although Jeremy Hunt made a very big deal about the fact that the country has avoided a technical recession, for most ordinary people, it won't make much difference to their living standards. The Office for Budget Responsibility in its assessment said yesterday that the country is still on course, our disposable incomes are still on course for their biggest 2-year decline since the 1950s. Not going to give us much cause to celebrate there. And that's partly because of inflation. We know inflation is eroding our spending power, but it's also because of taxes. The tax burden is at a post-war high. Some of those taxes you might know about, but some of them have been quietly introduced and we haven't really been aware of them. Stealth taxes, that's because the government has frozen tax thresholds. It means more people are being dragged into higher rates of tax, and we think that that's going to raise the government about £120 billion over the course of the next 5 years. Some asking that instead of offering, a big tax cut to the higher earners and older workers through the pension system, why Jeremy Hunt didn't move on that. But while taxes are going up, public services, real-term spending for public services, unprotected budgets, is actually being cut. We're essentially being asked to pay more for less. And the reason for that is quite simply because we don't have enough economic growth in the country, so it doesn't give the Chancellor much room to do either.
Gurpreet, thanks a lot. Well, time now to take a look at this morning's papers. Let's start with the Financial Times. Its headline, Hunt defies gloom with upbeat budget. The Metro calls the announcement the Easy Does It budget. The Express is in an upbeat mood, declaring we'll make this work for Britain. The news that fuel duty is to stay frozen sparks the headline in The Sun, tanks a lot. The Guardian's verdict is damning. The paper describes it as a giveaway for the 1%. Likewise, the Mirror headline there, pots for the rich. The Eye says that what we've actually seen is a 4 pence in the pound income rise by stealth. And on the same theme, the Times says we now have the biggest tax burden since the war. Well, as we were talking about just there, one of Europe's biggest banks, Credit Suisse, has secured a £45 billion loan from Switzerland's central bank. It's hoped the loan will shore up the bank's finances after its share price plunged yesterday. This morning, stock markets across Asia have fallen after the FTSE 100 had £75 billion wiped off its value yesterday, and the worst day of trading for a year. The turmoil has added to concerns about the broader banking sector after Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, two mid-sized firms in the US, collapsed last week. Well, still to come on the show, as rail strikes once again bring train services to a halt across much of the country, I'll talk to the RMT Union General Secretary, Mick Lynch. I'll also be talking to Lord West, former head of the Royal Navy and former Security Minister, to get his reaction to the defence spending measures in the budget. And at just after 8:30, I'll be joined by the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves for Labour's response to the budget and the Chancellor's comments this morning. A strike by rail workers from the RMT union will bring train services to a halt across the country today in the latest disruption caused by a wave of industrial action. Sky correspondent Saba Chowdhury joins me now from London's Euston Station. Saba, this is having a significant impact in this area, isn't it?
Good morning. Yes, it is. Yesterday it was London Underground staff striking, and today it's members of the RMT union, minus those from Network Rail, I should say, who are currently considering a pay offer. Now, what this means in practice is around 40 to 50% of trains will just be operating today. The majority of those impacted services in England, although there are, I should say, regional differences to be considered. Now, those striking yesterday and those striking today, really their message is one of the same. They want the same thing: better pay, working conditions and job security. But 9 months on in this long-going dispute and strike action we are seeing, we're at a stalemate. This is something that we haven't seen much movement on. The government have very recently offered what they're calling their best and final offer to members of the RMT union, which is a 5% backdated pay rise from last year and a 4% pay rise this year. Now, Mick Lynch, the leader of the RMT union, who is here on the picket line, has said, frankly, as he often does, that this is a dreadful offer, one that he put to his members and they're simply not happy with, and that's because it comes with strings attached. For them to accept this offer, the government say they have to accept some changes they want to make to the railways to modernise them. But Mick Lynch's union, the RMT, are saying that it's not good enough and they want an unconditional pay offer. And until they get that, they will strike today, they will strike on Saturday, 30th of March, and also the 1st of April.
Saba, thanks very much. Well, let's take a look at today's strikes and others coming up later this month. As well as today, rail workers have 2 more strike days planned on Saturday and Thursday, the 30th of March. Teachers are on day 2 of a national strike, while ambulance staff represented by Unite Union will walk out on the 20th. Driving examiners and university staff also have multiple days of strikes planned. More than 350 Amazon workers are also striking today in a row over pay. The GMB union members in Coventry are asking for a rise from £10.50 an hour to £15 after calling a 5% offer derisory. Amazon doesn't recognise the union and won't enter pay negotiations with its representatives. Now, Sky News understands that after more than a week of intense negotiations, health unions and the government are getting closer to agreeing a pay deal to avert further strikes in the NHS. Progress on the long-running dispute, which has led to unprecedented walkouts by nurses and ambulance workers, means a potential pay deal could be announced as soon as today. It's not clear, though, whether union members would accept the terms when they're balloted. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, is visiting Moldova today to pledge financial support as the country comes under pressure from Russian influence. Moldova borders Ukraine, where the war against the Russian invasion has now been raging for more than a year. Along that eastern border is Transnistria, an unrecognised breakaway state supported economically and militarily by Moscow. The US has suggested there are indications that Russia wants to build a land bridge through Ukraine to Transnistria. The Foreign Secretary will meet his Moldovan counterpart before announcing new financial aid to boost efforts to prevent Russian interference. We're expecting that visit through the morning, and we'll bring you more on it here on Sky News Breakfast. Now to Manchester United now, and representatives of the Qatari backer Sheikh Jassim are expected to visit Old Trafford today, with the Ineos founder, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, heading there tomorrow as the two prepare rival bids to buy the club. Well, our sports correspondent Rob Harris is here with me. Rob, does this mean that the current owners, the Glazer family, are ready to sell?
Well, there are still questions whether they really will sell the club. It was in November they announced they were looking at what they called strategic options, looking for new financing, anything up to a sale. So they launched this process with the Rain Bank, a merchant bank based in New York, and it led to, a month ago, bids coming in. We only know of two known bids from Sheikh Jassim bin Hamad and from Sir Jim Ratcliffe. There could be others. We also know of a financing offer from a group called Elliott. And what we don't know yet is the price acceptable? We don't know the price that officially that's on the table. Potentially around $4.5 billion might have valued the club at the offers coming in at, and the Glazers might want in excess of £5-6 billion for the club they've owned since 2005. The fans are desperate for an end of the Glazers' ownership. The heavy debt, the state of Old Trafford we're seeing there, the protests that have been raging, Glazer out, that have been running even since the day they bought the club in 2005. They want more spending. They want the glory days back. They want to be winning the Premier League again, which they haven't done so since 2013. So as it stands now, the potential new owners are going to be looking around the club. They're going to be at the training ground. They're going to be going through the books, the finances, the commercial deals, the player contracts to see just how much is the club worth so they can put the actual bid in to see if it's acceptable. And we've got on the one side this offer linked to Qatar from the Qatari Islamic Bank, Chairman Sheikh Jassim bin Hamad, the son of a former Prime Minister, with links to the sovereign wealth as well there, although they say it's not a state project. And then on the other side, the locally born Mancunian, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, who made his fortune through Ineos, who also has investments in other sports. So wait to see the outcome of those presentations.
Meanwhile, delegates for football's international governing body, FIFA, are meeting today. They're gathering for the organisation's annual congress in the Rwandan capital. What are we expecting to come out of that?
Well, we're expecting Gianni Infantino to be re-elected FIFA president, a term that began in 2016. He's also found a way of the rules allowing him to go beyond potential term limits until 2031. Many remember him from the start of the World Cup in Qatar when he gave that slightly strange speech, I am Qatari, I am migrant worker, when he was trying to defend the plight of Qataris and attack hypocrisy. He's come under a lot of criticism for some of his leadership of world football. He has grown the revenue. Several £billion. Is expecting more than £9 billion in revenue in the next cycle up to the 2026 World Cup. But he is under a criminal investigation in Switzerland over unauthorised meetings, allegedly with the undisclosed meetings, allegedly with the Attorney General. So there are questions as well over just how he's sort of led world football, the pursuit of more money, whether it's needed, and questions as we approach the Women's World Cup in Australia and New Zealand this year over prize money. The fact it's not equal with the men's, very distant from it, and also over a Visit Saudi sponsorship of that tournament. That's had a backlash from players and the host nations. OK, Rob, thanks very much. Let's take a look at some of the day's other headlines now. And a 29-year-old man has been charged with attempted murder after a woman was stabbed outside a leisure centre in Cheltenham last Thursday. Police say that Joanna Bowles from Welland Mews in Cheltenham also faces a charge of causing actual bodily harm and will appear at Westminster Magistrates Court later today.
Dozens of firefighters have been battling a blaze at a centuries-old hotel in Midhurst in West Sussex, where Ukrainian refugees are said to have been staying. Sussex police say that they are assisting the fire and rescue service. There's not yet been any reports of casualties. The UK is slipping down the global ranks on life expectancy. In 2021, we came 29th, according to researchers in Oxford and London. But 70 years ago, the UK was 7th. The analysis finds that since then, we've fared worse than all other G7 nations, except the USA. The current life expectancy is 79 years for men and nearly 83 years for women. Artificial sweeteners, often used in hot drinks, could apparently suppress immunity. According to new research, a high amount of sucralose lowers the activation of a type of white blood cell in animals and could have a similar effect in humans. This means the sweetener could eventually be used as a treatment for people with autoimmune disorders. Gary Lineker's agent has said he thought the Match of the Day presenter believed he had a special agreement with the BBC to tweet about refugees and immigration. Writing in the New Statesman, John Holmes said his client takes a passionate interest in the issue. Now, it's been quite a spiky start to the visit of politicians from the north and south of Ireland to Washington. The DUP leader, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, said the top Democrat in the US Senate, Chuck Schumer, needs to read up on his history after urging the DUP to go back to Stormont. From there, our Ireland correspondent Stephen Murphy reports.
It's that time of the year again in Washington, the Irish leader rubbing shoulders with the most powerful figures in US politics. This St. Patrick's Week, the hot topic is the Windsor Framework and whether it can be changed to appease the DUP and get Stormont back up and running.
So will it be reworked or changed?
I understand the question that you're asking me, but this is a very sensitive moment in this process. It's not for me to speak for other people. What's happened is we have an agreement at long last between the UK and the European Commission. Ultimately, it's going to be a decision for the UK Prime Minister as to when the UK decides to press ahead.
The DUP, who have refused to facilitate devolved government in Northern Ireland over the protocol and now the Windsor Framework, attend the same events in Washington. They often have to endure intense pressure to fall into line from powerful pro-Irish figures like the most senior politician in the Senate.
And now that the Windsor Framework has been announced, I sincerely hope that it clears the way for the DUP to join Sinn Féin in a power-sharing agreement. I say to all parties in the North, but especially to the DUP, let's get to the people's business.
The DUP doesn't take it lying down.
I would urge the Senator to read some history books and maybe he'll learn a little bit more about what really happens and the reality of the situation.
The party's message here, it wants Rishi Sunak to make changes to his New Deal.
We're saying the government needs to go further, needs to dig deeper to ensure that what we get is not only works for here and now, but is future-proof.
But there's no appetite to change the deal in London or Brussels. So for now, Washington is the sounding board for the pro- and anti-framework arguments ahead of Leo Varadkar's meeting with Joe Biden on St. Patrick's Day this Friday. Stephen Murphy, Sky News in Washington.
Now, the R&B singer Bobby Caldwell has died at the age of 71.
I came back to let you know. Got a thing
Best known for this hit, 1978's What You Won't Do for Love. The influential singer-songwriter had a soulful voice and musical style. It was adored by generations of fellow artists. His wife Mary said he died at their New Jersey home on Tuesday following a long illness.
You tried everything, but you don't give up.
Let's get a look at the weather now.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
A series of low-pressure systems spreading in from the Atlantic guarantees changeable conditions over the coming days with outbreaks of rain and some strong winds. Milder air is moving in, but the cold air is never too far away. fairly mild and breezy start to the day, with rain over much of Scotland and northern England. The rain belt will become slow moving, resulting in some significant rainfall totals in the west. Shower outbreaks of rain over western parts of the UK mainland will push eastwards through the morning.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
And with lots of parts of the world experiencing extreme weather conditions, let's take a look at the impact of climate change on the planet. The right half of the screen shows how the UK's power is currently being produced. On the top left, you can also see how much warmer it is now on the Earth than in 1880. That is when modern records began. And finally, bottom left, the total amount of CO2 emissions in millions of tonnes. Now you're watching Sky News. Coming up, the newly discovered work from the graffiti artist Banksy, which may have already been reduced to rubble. Now, a mural that appeared on the side of a derelict building in Kent has been confirmed as a Banksy, but unfortunately for fans of the graffiti artist, or maybe the owner of the home as well, it may already have been lost. The anonymous artist shared photographs on his official Instagram account. Shows this silhouette of a young boy, but it's not there anymore. He was accompanied by a cat appearing to open a pair of curtains from a first floor window. Now just a pile of rubble. Was it possibly removed? We don't know. But what is left are huge chunks of the wall on the ground. It's not known whether or not that work has been preserved. Well, back to the budget, and talking to the programme this morning, the Chancellor has defended his budget against the accusation that it mainly helps wealthy pensioners. Jeremy Hunt also said his plans will help many people through a difficult period, and told me that the changes to childcare will be the biggest transformation seen in his lifetime.
A great deal, because we introduced help for people struggling with cost of living pressures that amount to £3,300 for the typical household over this year and last year. We've extended the energy price guarantee at £2,500 for another 3 months. We've frozen fuel duty, which will keep the cost of petrol down. And what we are doing is we're helping people through a very, very difficult period.
If you've got a 9-month-old baby, you're not going to benefit from these because your baby will be 3 or 4 by the time it kicks in. Or if you have a 3-year-old baby, it'll be 5 by the time it kicks in. In fact, it's only people who are thinking about getting pregnant now who are going to benefit from this. It's not going to have kicked in by the next election. And it's going to take 3 years to organise wraparound childcare for schools. Why on earth does it take so long to sort out kids' clubs?
Well, this is the biggest transformation in childcare in my lifetime, Jane. It's a huge change, and we're going to need thousands more nurseries, thousands more schools offering provision they don't currently offer, thousands more childminders. We are going as fast as we can get the supply in the market to expand.
Well, our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen, is here with me in the studio. And Tamara, I put it to him that it wasn't really bold enough, but he seems confident that it is.
I think yesterday's announcements were full of optimism, but then when you start looking at the detail, you wonder how many groups are really going to benefit given this big squeeze on living standards and the fact that most people will be paying more tax because of the frozen thresholds. Certainly one of the big groups that did benefit yesterday, and a bit of a surprise, was people with a lot of pension savings, because the Chancellor lifted the lifetime allowance. So if you have £1 million in your pension, you get penalised every time you try and withdraw those savings at 55%. The Chancellor announced that would be lifted, not to a high level, but gotten rid of altogether. He said it would help senior doctors in their 50s who are dropping out of the workforce because they are being penalised for taking money out of their pensions. Now, according to the OBR, that's the official forecast for statistics, it might bring about 15,000 people back into the workforce. But of course, you may also get some people who decide to drop out earlier because they're allowed to save more in their pensions. So it could be, giving with one hand and taking away with another. So it's been pointed out that this measure, which is pretty expensive, it's been costed at £1.2 billion a year once it gets going. It's basically about £80,000 for each one of those people you bring back to the workforce. So being described as an interesting priority. Labour have said this is the wrong priority at the wrong time for the wrong people. They call it a tax cut for the top 1%, and they say they would reverse it. I think we can expect them to try and force a vote on that in the next few days.
OK, tomorrow. Thanks very much. Now, a strike by rail workers today will cause more disruption as members of the RMT union at 14 operators walk out in a long-running dispute over pay and conditions. I'm joined now by the RMT's General Secretary, Mick Lynch. Mick Lynch, good to talk to you this morning. Can I ask you what you thought of the budget, first of all? Was there anything in there for you?
No, there's no move from the government to solve these public sector pay disputes. There's certainly nothing that we can recognise for the railway, and it seems to be a budget for the rich. And there'll be a continuous transfer of wealth from working people because the tax thresholds for ordinary workers have not gone up. But for the wealthy, they can put up to £60,000 a year into their pension scheme, and they will have unlimited tax break on their lifetime's earnings. So it seems a peculiar step to take, where you're giving more money to the wealthy and taking money off the poor, and that's a transfer of wealth in our society, which we saw under Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, and Jeremy Hunt's going the same way, it seems.
Let's move on to what's actually happening today with you and the ongoing strikes. The Rail Delivery Group says that the RMT's been offered 9% over 2 years and 13% specifically to the lowest paid workers. Is that true? And if so, why haven't you accepted it?
Well, we haven't accepted it because it's a really poor offer. It's rubbish, really. It's way below the rate of inflation.
2 years.
Members haven't. Well, I'll tell you what. If you let me answer, we've haven't had a pay increase for 3 years. Our members, during that period, have been subject to an inflation rate on the retail price index of over 22%, and they've been offered 9% over 2 years. But they have to fund that themselves through cuts to their terms and conditions, changes to their working practices, reductions in pay rates across the industry, and of course the closure of every booking office in the country. And that's unacceptable to us. We should get new money on the table. We shouldn't have to accept all these changes to our conditions in an industry that is 24/7. We need proper agreed rules on rostering and staffing and accessibility for people who want to use our railway. And all these companies are interested in is maximising their profits. And what we need to understand is that since the pandemic, they have made over £420 million in profit, these train operating companies. They're currently running profits at over £118 million a year. They're paying their chief executives. The First Group chief executive had an increase last year of 275% in his remuneration. His finance officer had over 150% increase in remuneration. So they are literally fat cats getting rich on the back of our members' work and the extortionate fares that the public have to pay, while they're telling us we can't have a pay rise. That's unacceptable.
You say it's a rubbish offer, 9% over 2 years, 13% to the lowest paid. But according to the Guardian newspaper, a similar offer has been given to Network Rail, staff there, and that's been put to referendum, which we're expecting to get a result on next Monday. I mean, they clearly don't think it's that rubbish an offer if they're willing to put it to their workers. Shouldn't you put it to your workers anyway and see what your workers think of it, whether or not they think it's a rubbish offer?
Well, it's an increased offer. It's a better offer than the train operating companies have made. So, and the details are in that offer. There's an extra amount of money and there's backdating that's in that offer, and that's why it's been put to a referendum. Those negotiations have concluded at the moment. We went to our members, thousands of them, and did a mass consultation on the details of this offer, and the money issue wasn't the main priority. It's the conditions and the ripping up of our contracts of employment and the dilution of our terms and conditions that has caused this offer to be stuck. So they need to improve what they want to pay our members, and they can afford that because of the extortionate profits they're making from the fare payer and the taxpayer, and they could maintain our conditions through agreement in negotiations. They're unwilling to do that because they want to make those profits even bigger. And if you take all these companies, Abellio, Go Ahead and First Group and so on, they're nearly all subject to takeover bids from private equity companies because they see that if they drive down conditions in this industry, they can maximise profit. So there are overseas equity companies that want to take these companies over and drive up the corporate return for their dividend holders and shareholders, We don't find that acceptable. We want a balanced deal for our people that retains their conditions of employment and gets them a decent pay increase, and that's not on the table at the moment.
Do you think passengers care about that? Do you not think passengers just want to be able to get to work? Do you think they mind what the motivation is? You're saying that the motivation for what the companies are doing is all money. The companies will say that their motivation is to make the businesses run better. But as far as passengers are concerned, they don't care what the motivation is. They just want the trains to be running. And there are people who can't get to work today, can't get their kids to school today, because once again, you're on strike.
I'm here at Euston Station, and we've had the most appalling train service that any railway company has provided in history. And if you take Northern Rail and Transpennine Express, what these companies specialise in is failure. They've proven time and again that they are incapable of running the railway. So what the passengers want, I believe, is a decent, competent management system where they can expect a reliable and safe railway at a reasonable price. These train operating companies have succeeded in extracting profit, billions of pounds of profit since privatisation, and have totally degraded our railway system. They haven't invested a penny. All of the investment in the railway comes from the taxpayer. It goes straight into the hands of rolling stock leasing companies, and the people that lose out are the staff and the passengers. So what we need to do is get rid of these middlemen who all they specialise in collecting dividends and fares off the taxpayer, and get a decent system of railway operation, which is a square deal for the passengers, the staff and the taxpayer as well. And what we need to do is change the system, because all they're interested in is farming revenue and paying it out in dividends to their people. And that's what the passengers should get as a contract from this government, rather than the exploitation they're currently getting.
But passengers just want to get to work, to just go about their daily lives. And you say that customers want a reliable railway, and I absolutely agree with you.
If you speak to everybody in the north of England at the minute, and anyone who wants to use West Coast railways, they can't rely on getting to work, even when we're not on strike. There's more disruption when we're not on strike than when we are, in some cases. It's an appalling system, and the people that are running our railway at the moment have proven themselves completely incompetent. So what we need to do is get a settlement to this dispute, and then get on with reforming and restructuring our railway in the interest of the public, in the interest of the passenger, in the interest of our economy and our environment. That's what we need to do. That's the task in front of us. And that would start with resolving this dispute with a decent offer to our members that we could put to a referendum.
But you see, there are others who will say that actually, because of the number of strike days, they are now considering different ways of working and ways that have worked around since COVID. People are much happier now working from home, absolutely, for a lot of the time. And some would argue that you're actually striking your own way out of a job, because you're going to contribute to the railways becoming less popular, less reliable. People are going to stop relying on the railways.
Well, I don't think that's true. That's a government line that you're punting out on their behalf. That's the sort of stuff they come out with.
Excuse me, you don't know. Excuse me, I'm talking to you about conversations I've had. Please, I'm not going to have you stand there and accuse me of being a government mouthpiece. I'm a human being, I'm a middle-aged woman, and I'm a journalist. And I'm talking to you about conversations I've had with people I know. This has got nothing to do with the government.
It's exactly the phraseology that I hear across the table from government ministers, almost verbatim. So there you go. Maybe you're just very in tune with what they say. So what we've got is a return to the railway. OK, well, fine. Maybe they're in tune with the government as well. So we've got a return to railways. We've got a return to profit-making by these companies. And we've got a return to fare hikes. So what we need to do is change the system. We need to get a railway that's reliable so that people can use it, so they can get back into our towns and cities, revive the economy for the hospitality industry and all the other people that rely on the railways and public transport. But what we're seeing now is a government that's determined to drive down public transport usage, whether that's on the buses or the railway. Fares are being hiked, services are becoming more and more unreliable, and the problem is that there is not a coherent railway system in our country. It is completely fractured and broken, and we need to revise that and get a decent system that's in all our interests.
Mick Lynch, General Secretary of the NUT, thanks for joining us today. Well, let's take you to Tokyo now. We've got latest pictures of the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace. He is meeting his Japanese and Italian counterparts. He's been meeting them over the last few minutes. He's there for a trilateral meeting. I wonder if we may get some words from him at some point today to get his reaction to the budget yesterday. £11 billion for defence over the next 5 years. Is he pleased with that? Is it enough? We shall find out, hopefully, at some point this morning. Now, Spanish police say they've recovered a submarine suspected of transporting cocaine across the Atlantic. A team of police divers were able to refloat the submarine, and the Guardia Civil then transported the vessel to the port of Zufur, where it was confirmed to be empty. Curious. You're watching Sky News. Still to come, 82 Premier League goals, 47 goals for England, and now 34 years of age. We'll tell you whose birthday it is after the break. Now, before the break, we asked you to guess whose birthday it is today. And if you did, well done. It was, drumroll please, Theo Walcott, the Southampton and former England footballer, turns 34 today. Last week, he even made the suggestion that he could retire as early as this year and pursue a career in journalism. Hope his pension pot's big enough. Also, sticking with the birthday theme, on Tuesday, we wished Sir Michael Caine a happy 90th birthday. Well, a clip shared on social media since has showed the actor celebrating his 90th with a star-studded dinner attended by Tom Cruise, David Walliams and Denise Welch, who's not pictured here. A strange bunch. I hope it was a great day. I'm sure it'll have been a giggle. Now, one of the biggest announcements in the budget is the government's plan to provide 30 hours of free childcare per week for working parents of a child under 5. But for many providers already facing soaring costs and staffing shortages, the Chancellor's measures are not going to be that easy to deliver. With me now is Maggie Bolger, who's the founder and chief executive of children's daycare provider Be Together. Maggie, thanks very much for coming in. What did you think when you heard it yesterday? I mean, on the face of it, it's going to take a bit of time to deliver, but it does mean that for a lot of parents, there's going to be some subsidised/free childcare in the coming months and years.
I mean, from a parent's perspective, I think it's wholly positive. From a provider's perspective, I think everyone in the industry is just going, here we go again. You know, free is not free for a start, it's funded. And we're in a crisis, we're in a recruitment crisis. So to be able to even provide all of these extra places and stuff, we're all sitting there going, okay, so where's the help and support for us to be able to recruit and to find people that want to work in the industry? We don't have them. We're in there's a massive shortage. Year on year now, we've got a decline in people taking up childcare qualifications. The industry doesn't have the best reputation. People don't want to come into it. And people within it, from COVID onwards, they're leaving us. We're going into hospitality and into retail. So I think our big question is, okay, so how are you going to help us recruit people to be able to deliver?
Well, the government says it's going to give you 30% more money for these places. That must go some way towards helping.
30% more, but we've still got a lot of increased costs. We're not just talking about increased staffing, energy bills, rents, rates. Everything has gone insane. So 30% more. Also, the devil's in the detail with what the government always says. You know, as I said, free and funded is very different to what we actually get. It's it's an amount given to settings depending on where they are in the country. And it's often, I think people are familiar with the term champagne nurseries, lemonade funding. It's just not enough. And I think the main thing in the sector is recruitment. We don't have an influx of people anymore. So since Brexit, we don't have the influx from Europe. So we're reliant on a local market. And as I said, year on year, there's a decline in people wanting to take a childcare.
Why do you think people don't look at a career in childcare and think, you know, that's a great career. I'm getting to spend my time with young kids. Yes, they're exhausting. Anyone who's had them will know that. But it can also be really, really rewarding. It can be a lot of fun. It can be a really rewarding career. Is it just the money?
I think it's a lot of things. It is renowned to be underpaid compared to teachers and primary. It is daycare, so it's you know, schools are term times. You get the holidays. This is 360 or so days of the year. And it should be fun, you're right. That's one of my big things when I came into this industry. I set up a day nursery because my youngest child I was working mum at the time, and I was like, right, I need to put him somewhere, and it should be fun. I designed beautiful spaces to make them really fun and engaging, but there's a lot of it's just a lot of stress and fear in the industry. You know, Ofsted is a governing body that is quite fearful, and there's a lot of tick boxing, and it's not fun, actually. It's quite stressful. And how we bring the fun back and how we bring the industry back into something that is a rewarding career again is I think, what everyone in my industry in particular is trying to figure out. Sadly, a lot of people that are massively passionate are leaving. They're selling up now and just saying, we're out. So we are in this crux at the moment, and it's like, how do we rebrand childcare and make it a rewarding career again? You know, and I think the government's going to have to come to the party with helping with this, because it's a huge industry. It's an industry in crisis, and that's not a term that's been thrown around loosely at the moment. It is on its knees.
OK, Maggie Bolger, really good to talk to you. Thanks a lot for coming in and explaining it to us. Well, we talked to the Chancellor in the last hour. Still to come in the next hour, I'm going to talk to the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, for the Labour reaction to Jeremy Hunt's budget and his comments this morning. Stay with us for that. Lots more to come. We've got an action-packed couple of hours ahead. Don't go away.